Good evening and welcome back. Starting off another week, this time on Monday, the 15th, and just about the middle of August already. We've got a lot of ground to cover, as you can very well imagine. We'll back up and wrap up coverage of the election fraud trial that wrapped up in and of itself on Friday, as I'm sure and I believe most of you were with us here late Friday night, beginning at 10:30, as we had verdicts that were handed down by a federal jury. Tonight we'll wrap up with just some closing arguments that we now have. The time did not allow me to present for you on Friday. Some other information about the sentencing deadline, some conditions of release, and some things that are upcoming in regards to this particular case possibly and other similar situations. The prosecutor and the government contending that this situation is an investigation that is very well still ongoing. And of course, the Supreme Court is now in session of Kentucky, that is. We'll talk a bit about that and a whole lot of other information on that front. Tragically, though, we have to come into the studio and learn that a McGoffin County woman confined to her bed due to her health conditions did not make it out of her home after it caught on fire over the course of the weekend. It's been a very thorough investigation to determine exactly what caused the fire and how she died. But as of right now, it appears as though a very tragic accident. We'll talk with some officials as to what they believe as to how it happened possibly, and more from the scene in just a few moments. A new calendar for a new week, and of course, as I referred to a few times late last week, and this perhaps be the last because we're going to have a lot of catch-up to do all week long. A whole lot of governmental meetings in McGoffin and Johnson County that I put on pause last week due to the election coverage and the trial coverage, that is. That, some other stories that we've already got in the works since well early last week. So a whole lot of news, a full week's worth of news as of right now, and that's withstanding any other things that might happen throughout the week. And of course, we will be covering those, and there will be reports to come. With all of that said, one thing before we get into our top headlines tonight, one of our next focal points as far as the news is concerned all week long, Community Day. It's this Saturday, can you believe it? And they've got a special going on this year. Now, you can't purchase them before. They can't be pre-sold. That's what they want us to emphasize that. But they've got a deal in the works for getting into Community Day, a family deal, if you will. They're offering a family four deal, family of four, which includes parents and kids between the age of 12 and 18. Kids under 12 get in free already. But for a family of four, 2 adults and 2 children, 12 to 18 years of age, $20 will get you all four in the gate and into Community Day this coming Saturday. And that's a great deal. I mean, that's just a great, great deal. It's going to be a great Saturday. A lot of course, entertainers and other things. There's been some additions, I believe, to the events, and we'll be talking about those throughout the week here on Your News Today. Community Day here already. Man, I tell you what, summer's going to be gone before, indeed, you know it. Our top headline tonight will sadly and tragically include details that surround the death of a McGoffin County woman who the Kentucky State Police, as well as local authorities, confirmed died in her bed over the course of the weekend. It happened around 2 o'clock in the afternoon on yesterday. It happened on New 460, or off of New 460, I should say, to be more precise, on Rockhouse Road. Fire Chief Paul Howard says one of the first people to notice the flames and the smoke billowing from the residents was actually one of his firemen who also works for the local TranStar ambulance service.
The afternoon about 1:30, Cyberville Fire Department got a report of a house fire on 460. Upon arrival, we found a house fire engulfed in flame coming out the front window of the house. We extinguished the flames and discovered that one of the occupancies was deceased inside the resident, a pansy-haired deceased during the fire. It was noticed by the church that's next to it. One of their members walked outside and seen the smoke coming from the house, and one of my firefighters, Steve Reisner, a captain with my fire department, drives for TranStar ambulance service, he was coming down 460 and noticed it too and called it in. Probably the reason we had such quick response on it.
However, even with that quick response by the Sayersville Fire Department and the mutual aid that was supplied by the North McGoffin Volunteer Fire Department and District 3 and possibly others, the fire appeared to have spread very quickly and appeared to have began around where the deceased was discovered, and possibly her oxygen supply may have also been a contributing factor.
One of the things we're looking at right now is smoking in bed with oxygen is one of the things we're looking at. We're trying to rule out everything to make sure everything is that's what it is. She was found in the living room in a hospital bed. She was obese and bedfast. We sent her body to the state medical examiner's office to determine if she had smoke in her lungs or anything prior to the fire or after the fire. And then the people this year, we had the state fire marshal's office had a deputy fire marshal here. We had 2 Kentucky State Police arson investigators here, and we had a state police detective here. And then they posted a 24-hour trooper on scene here at this residence.
That trooper stationed at that residence to protect what may have been later determined as a crime scene. While it was standard operating procedure to be as thorough as they were, they did, however, determine through a preliminary autopsy report, says Magoffin County Coroner Mark Jenkins, that this was a situation that did not involve any foul play, but definitely a tragic, tragic accident.
Deceased in the house appeared to be a female. It ended up being a female, 60 years old, basically bedfast. Don't know the origin of the fire, but the lady evidently was home alone and couldn't get out of the house. At this time, Kentucky State Medical Examiner says smoke inhalation, preliminary.
We also confirmed through Fire Chief Paul Howard that the deceased daughter, identified as Jennifer Collett, and her 2 children are staying elsewhere with family, and that there was also no insurance on the structure and or contents. There was also 2 small animals, 2 pet dogs, which were outside dogs, which could still be seen outside after the fire. Members of the Sayersville Fire Department had actually taken them some food after going back to the residence to check on it earlier today. The investigation remains ongoing into the fire and the fatality by the Sayersville Fire Department, the Magoffin County Coroner's Office, as well as Detective Ryan Hamilton of Post 9, as well as their arson investigator, Nick Endicott of the Kentucky State Police. Other top news in a few moments. We'll also be talking about, as you can well imagine, the weather, which quickly changed by the afternoon. We do have warm and humid conditions and a stationary frontal boundary, if you will, all combining to give us a chance of some showers and storms like what we saw this afternoon through much of Magoffin and Johnson County. We'll have that same humidity and that same boundary also give us that throughout the rest of the week. Temperatures will back off after tomorrow, largely in part due to the showers and clouds that we're going to see associated with all of this. So it might be a pattern you want to get used to. We'll update that, of course, in more detail in just a few moments. That will be following other headlines. Stay tuned. For high-speed internet starting at 15 meg for all of your gaming, movie, home, and business solutions, or to watch TV, including your favorite local channels without a contract with hundreds of channels and digital and HD quality, and to stay connected 24/7 with friends and family, a direct line to 911, or to give your business the link it needs, choose telephone service you know is always there. Just click on their link on this site to find out how affordable the latest technology in communications can be. Foothills Communications. Up next, we'll wrap up last week's election fraud trial in London in the federal courthouse in an effort to get you the verdicts as timely as possible. This past Friday, time did not allow any information about closing arguments. We covered all the testimony up to that point and then brought you the verdict. We'll go briefly through some of the statements made in closing arguments at this time, brought on behalf of the prosecution and all the attorneys representing the defendants as well as some post-election fraud trial interviews and information as well, and a few things that we have on our radar related to the same topic. As for closing arguments, first off was the Assistant U.S. Attorney, Mr. Boone, who began closing arguments at around 3:35 or so on Friday. Boone informing the jury that the 2014 election in Magoffin County was rigged, and that rigged elections connected to this case actually go back to 2002. He said that Judge Hardin, Gary Rooster Reisner, and Larry Shepard devised the plan to rig the election, saying that Gary Rooster Reisner handled the money, Tammy Reisner and Mason Daniels took voters to the polls, and Larry Shepard assisted those voters. Boone explained that some Republican leaders also agreed to work with the Democratic Party to create the slate of candidates, and allegedly adding Carson Montgomery, Republican candidate for sheriff, was their payment for allowing the Democrats to pick who they wanted to serve at the polls on Election Day and during in-house absentee voting. Boone carefully continued to lay out the path which allowed the election to be rigged, saying those accused entered into a conspiracy to set a slate of candidates and that they had each volunteered and participated in that conspiracy. Later, Mr. Coffey, attorney for Tammy Reisner, told the jury that it was, in fact, Garlina Lovely and not Tammy Reisner who bought the votes, that it was Lovely who paid for those votes and not Reisner, and that all he had heard here was Tammy, but in reality, he considered to be Tiny Tammy, and she is not the mighty Doc Harden. Attorney Lane for Mason Daniels told the jury that when Daniels testified, he was the only one to do so on his own behalf. He answered properly and didn't beat around the bush, and that he acted worthy of being believed. Both witnesses who testified against Daniels had in fact admitted to having sold their votes. He reminded the jury, that not once had Scotty McCarty even mentioned Mason Daniels, and there was no evidence that his client was connected to any of the others. He also reminded the jury that Daniels had no reason to support Doc Harden because he actually disliked Harden over his mother losing her job at the nursing home because of Harden. Jason Nemus, who represented Larry Shepard, attempted to bolster his claim of innocence by telling the jury that Pastor Justin Williams had testified that he served as an election officer to assure that there was no wrongdoing when the votes were being cast. Pastor Williams said he supported John Montgomery in the Republican Party, not Charles Harden. Nemus reminded the jury of the Republican Party Chairman Manuel Montgomery, who stated that Pastor Williams had been picked to fill the position of Mike Prater, who had abruptly resigned in the early days of absentee voting. Montgomery also had asserted that they wanted to pick someone whose integrity was above reproach. Justin Williams said Nemus should be commended for his honesty, and the jury itself had seen his character, and that was why Manuel Montgomery had picked him. Nemus also reminded the jury of Garlina Workman, who sat beside Pastor Williams the entire time, and she said absolutely nothing illegal was done while she was there, and that she never left the room all day. She even had lunch sit-in so she could feel the process was kept legal. Both Pastor Williams and Garlina Workman testified that they saw nothing done, and neither saw Larry Shepard with a cell phone. Cell phones, he says, as you'll remember, was how Scotty McCarty said that they had discussed a safer method to verify who was to be paid after their vote. In Nemus's words, no cell, no jail. Assistant U.S. Attorney, though, Ken Taylor, gave the rebuttal closing. He went over some of the key points in the prosecution witnesses' statements. He told the jury that one of the reasons that Scotty McCarty's testimony could be believed was because Scotty did not mention Doc E. Harden, even though he hated him so. He reminded them how John Montgomery had actually won the vote on the election day with only a few votes more than Judge Harden, but had lost the election to Harden because of the extreme number of absentee ballots, which reportedly were for Harden, as had Renee Shepard. He reminded the jury of McCarty's testimony where Larry Shepard had called him and told him not to pay a particular person because he had not even voted so. That, according to Taylor, he said was a phone. Well, that indicated he said that there was a phone indeed somewhere. Taylor ended his statement to the jury saying that it was a very sad day for the people of Magoffin County. He says, we look out and see these illegal things and say somebody should do something about it. If you don't, jury, who will? So after those closing arguments, and those, of course, just summaries of, the trial ended right at 6 o'clock in the evening, and as I told you last Friday, the jury elected to begin deliberations immediately rather than come back on tomorrow, an option the judge gave them. They did come back with the verdicts just before 10 o'clock, and just to go over real quickly, as I did on Friday, Gary Rooster Reisner was found guilty on 8 counts and not guilty on 1. Larry Shepard was found guilty on the conspiracy count and not guilty on the other count that he faced after 2 were dropped because of reasons that we've already covered. Tammy Reisner also had 2 counts dropped, and she was found guilty on 3 counts and not guilty on 2. And Mason Daniels was the only defendant who testified on his own behalf, and he was found not guilty, as we covered, on all charges, of which he faced 3. And he was the only one to speak to cameras that we had following the court proceedings and the verdicts. We'll hear from Daniels and his attorney and have some more post-verdict details about the trial and the ongoing investigation right after this. Now back to wrapping up the election fraud trial of last week in London, Kentucky. With each count that the defendants were found guilty of carrying a maximum penalty up to 5 years in prison and up to $250,000 in fine, Magistrate Rooster Reisner faces potentially up to 40 years, Larry Shepard up to 5, and Tammy Reisner up to 15. While the only defendant to be determined not guilty by the jury, Mason Daniels, was also the only one to speak to our cameras following the trial.
Well, they come out, I got not guilty, as it should have.
What are your plans for tomorrow?
I'm going riding all day. Yeah.
I thought this was a great verdict for Mason. It was nice to see him get exonerated from the charges that were made. I thought the reason that he got exonerated was because he took the courageous decision to take the stand on his own behalf, and I think that it was his testimony that tipped the balance in favor of the jury finding him not guilty.
Your technique and the way you portrayed him and the way you had your ending argument to the jury, was that something you had figured out from the very start, or did you kind of play it by ear when you started?
Well, I thought that's where we were going to end up. I mean, obviously trials sometimes take turns and twists, but yeah, I thought all along that the plan all along was to have him testify, and I thought he would be a good witness and that he would be persuasive to the jury, and if they heard from him, they wouldn't convict him.
Now, while U.S. Attorney Ken Taylor would not go on camera and speak, he did give us a statement, and it says very short and to the point, quote, "We are very pleased with this case, and the investigation is ongoing." Sentencing has been set for later on this December. All three those convicted were allowed to remain free per the court set conditions of release. Keep in mind there are other things happening on this front, so to speak, or at least in this arena. The Supreme Court is back in session in Kentucky as of today. They have a rendition day set for this coming Thursday. 1 week from this coming Thursday, my apologies, on the 25th. They could report out on the civil case at any time between now and then, on Thursday the 25th, or maybe not even during this particular cycle. We will be watching that and monitoring that daily. There's also the investigation into the disappearing Mack truck, an investigation that is now apparently underway, not just by the state auditor who turned it over to the Kentucky State Police and the Attorney General's office, but as well as the FBI, who was already apparently aware of that truck. With that said, sentencing set for Thursday, December the 1st at 1 o'clock. The defendants all are to make an interview with the probation officer at least within 1 week of their guilty verdict, which was, of course, Friday night. I'll be right back with more news and announcements. Find out what's happening on our calendar. Mondays, it's always a big day. We'll have all that and more next. Up next on tonight's McGoffin Farm Bureau Community Calendar, North McGoffin Elementary's got a special site-based council meeting set for tomorrow. This meeting is set for 4:30. A reminder that McGoffin County's SAFE Coalition, that's Substance Abuse Free Environment Coalition, has a regular meeting set for this Wednesday. That meeting is at 1 o'clock at the McGoffin County Health Department. And a reminder about diabetes education and management classes for people with diabetes or their family members. They're going to talk about carb counting and dining out and device training and foot care and making a plan for movement. The list goes on. It's for an hour, 5 to 6. That is on Tuesdays. And the first one's tomorrow. The next one will be September the 20th. You can see the dates from there on. But the first one starts tomorrow at the McGoffin County Health Department, 5 o'clock, 349-6162 if you want to call with any questions. And with Heritage Day quickly approaching, so are the baby and children's pageants, and the sign-ups for which will begin Friday the 26th. I'll remind you, as it's not that far away, but they will be Friday the 26th and Saturday the 27th and Monday the 29th at the Historical Society in McGoffin County. And if you've got calendar announcements, birthdays, anniversaries, or like those you just heard, mail them, email, Facebook, phone, fax, drop them off at the studio on East Maple Street above the Sagersville Post Office. Tell me, we'll tell everyone about it. Also, keep in mind, the news is always on our website, that is, at yournewstoday.com. On to funeral service announcements. We do have two for this evening, and the first comes with my apologies. We do have an error on screen. Mr. Bill Lovely, and not Bailey, my apologies, but Bill Lovely, 52 of Sagersville, passed away on Friday's date, the son of the late Rayon and Minerva Howard Lovely. He's survived by brothers Ronald, Donald, Kenner, and Stanley Lovely, and sister Vonda Miller. Visitation will be after 6 o'clock tomorrow, all day Wednesday, and prior to funeral services Thursday at 1 o'clock, all from the McGoffin County Funeral Home. Once again, my apologies, but in honor of 52-year-old Bill Lovely of Sagersville. And as I referred to earlier in one of our stories this evening, the tragic passing of Pansy Kraft Howard, who we believe was 60 upon her death yesterday. Arrangements are incomplete at this hour, but I'm told by the Sagersville Funeral Home are being made by the family and to be announced very soon. in honor of, once again, Pansy Kraft Howard. Weather-wise, per your Licking Valley RECC forecast for tonight, this is an update weather-wise with my talking to you right now, my time right around 10:30 or so, and there was nothing to show you on the local Doppler radar in eastern Kentucky, or in the, well, I should say in the viewing area whatsoever. Way down south, just coming out of Knoxville and crossing the Tennessee-Kentucky border was a cell that could be on par to track northward as they have been all afternoon and make it into parts of the viewing area in the next few hours by around 12 or 1 or so. That's kind of iffy at this point, but the only thing I really see to worry about tonight.